Ladies and gentlemen, welcoming to the Ray Carr Show here in Cleveland, Ohio, is legendary singer-songwriter Mr. Graham Nash. Graham, thank you for spending some time with us.
You're very welcome, Ray. How are you?
I am absolutely wonderful, and I did a lot of research on you, and of course I've been a fan for decades, and I wanted to start out with talking about your latest project, This Path Tonight. Let's talk a little bit about your latest album, the first studio album in 14 years.
It is the first studio album, but it's not the first album. I made 16 CDs in that 14 years.
Okay, well, this particular project has a lot of, I did some little research on this. A lot of great songs. In fact, there was one song that really caught my ear. It was called "Myself at Last."
Yeah, that was the moment I knew that the recording sessions were going to go particularly well, because that track on the record is the very first attempt at the very first song we ever tried.
Wow.
One take.
That's magic.
Yes, it is.
It really is, And there's a gentleman that had a lot to do with helping with all that is Shane Fontaine.
Yes, my friend Shane Fontaine, a brilliant, brilliant guitar player and musician. He wrote 20 songs with me. And we recorded the 20 songs in 8 days, and Shane, I believe, produced a wonderful album for me.
Yeah. Graham, you're going to be at the Music Box Tuesday, September 19th here in Cleveland, and I would highly recommend everybody in the area listening to my voice right now to attend that show because it will be amazing. And, Graham, you have learned a lot over the years of, from the days of listening to Skiffle and the Radio Luxembourg. What have you taken from all these experiences until you're the stage you are right now? I mean, like, looking back on everything, how do you reflect?
I guess it's just the power of music. When I was 13, 14 years old, listening to all the American Top 40 from Radio Luxembourg, as you said, when the weather cooperated, the signal would come through to the north of England where I lived. And on Sunday night was a show about the American Top 40, and that introduced me to, all the great rock and roll stars, Buddy Holly and Elvis and the Everly Brothers and Gene Vincent, Eddie Cochran, and all the people that I love. And quite frankly, the music grabbed me and has never let me go.
People like Lonnie Donegan and the Skiffle, that was a music that really was kind of unique to England, and America really didn't take to it as much, but it was a very good music.
Well, not only that, not only was it good music, but it was reasonably cheap to be able to do.
Yeah.
If you had a cheap acoustic guitar and a washboard, which everybody's grandmother had in the cellar when she did her washing, for drums, and a T-chest bass, meaning a piece of string on a pole attached to a T-chest case. That was the bass. So basically, if you could put that together, which most people could, you could be in a skiffle band, which I was.
Wow. Now, being born in the north of England, near Manchester, it was a port near Liverpool that you were able to get a lot of the American records, which other parts of England weren't as readily available.
Yeah, that's because those records were brought home by, sons and daughters and boyfriends and girlfriends that were in the merchant navy, and they would go to America on whatever military project it was. And they'd be in New York or in New Orleans, and they'd find all these records, and they'd bring them back and play them for all the kids. And, of course, several of those kids were in bands. And so, somebody picked up a song like, Money by Barrett Strong and all the Coaster stuff, and, off we ran.
Yeah, Barrett Strong, one of the first stars of Motown. What song, when you were younger, when you first heard it, this is what I want to do?
Bye Bye Love by the Everly Brothers.
Harmonies, of course, and later that's, your trademark. Let's talk about your relationship with Alan Clark. His real name was Harold. Talk a little bit about that.
I was sitting in my schoolroom class, in Mr. Burke's class at Odsall Secondary Modern School. And an old lady came, Alan's grandmother, with him, and he had just district outside of Manchester to one much closer to Manchester, and he was going to attend the school that I was in, and he was 6 years old. I was 6 years old, and he sat next to me, and we've been friends ever since.
And how did the Hollies actually form?
Because me and Alan would sing together with two acoustic guitars, and a kid came up to us and said, why don't you put an electric band together? And he recommended this guy, Pete Bocking, who could play every solo that we ever loved. And so we got a lead guitar player and a bass player and a drummer, and we started. There were five of us, and we were called the Four Tones. God knows why. And then the Four Tones, turned into the Hollies in December of 1962.
The name Hollies, was that a tribute to Buddy Holly?
Yes, and the fact that it was Christmas.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. That was it. I think the Hollies were one of the most influential bands, other than maybe the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. I think the music that they put out from 1963 to 1967 was some of the best music I've ever heard.
Some good pop music, definitely. But you see, I learned to write melodies that you can't forget if you've heard them two or three times.
Right.
But the words that we put to those songs were Moon Dune Screw Me in the Back of the Car kind of songs,
Right.
When I came to live in America with David and Stephen, and I lived with Joni for a couple of years, my songwriting changed. I realized if I could put real words to these melodies that I could create, then maybe we got something. And that's what happened.
You came to America, and I believe you jumped on a palm tree, and you said, I don't want to go back.
That's right.
When you, establish yourself in America and you realize that the harmonies and the cohesiveness with Crosby, Stills, and Nash, together as one of the greatest trios with, including Neil Young would make four. So talk about those days and how all that developed.
Well, the truth is that after I heard me and David and Stephen sing in Joni's living room, and we found that blend in one song, well, actually in a half a song, my life changed. I realized that I would have to follow this sound, and I have to go back to England and undo my life, which is what I did. And that's how powerful that blend was.
What was that song that you knew when it all was going to make sense and all work?
You Don't Have to Cry.
Wow. And then, of course, to this day, when you listen to those records, and they still sound fresh.
Good.
Yeah, they really do. And you also mentioned the three most important things in your life were love, family, and friends. Would you consider those things still, the most important things in your life right now?
That's a little difficult to answer.
Okay.
We keep getting asked to do benefits by the hundreds, as you know, and we have done hundreds, literally hundreds of benefits in our lives. But you have to prioritize your time.
Sure.
You have to figure out what's important to you and what you can concentrate and maybe change. And it is our children and the health of our planet and the nuke industry. And those are my three driving forces in my life.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, the latest album, as we mentioned earlier before in the interview, is This Path Tonight. There's a lot of good tracks on that album. Let's talk about a few of those because it is the latest, and I'm sure you're going to be playing quite a bit of that when you come to Cleveland. So let's talk a little bit about some of your favorites on that album.
Well, Myself at Last is I just like the whole piece. I fell out of love with my wife. I divorced my wife of nearly 40 years and fell in love with this wonderful artist from New York City, Amy Grantham, and my life changed completely. And these songs on This Path Tonight are my emotional journey of what was happening to me at that point in my life.
And how has it been? Has it been well received for you?
Yes, it has. And I can tell you that, I understand if we do a great version of Teach Your Children or Our House, I understand people getting on their feet and clapping. But when you can get them to their feet with a song that they've only heard once, that's different.
Oh, that is different, right? Because they're not familiar with it, and it captures them. They hear it, and they go, wow, it resonates with them.
Yep.
Wow. Also, you're a very accomplished photographer.
I've been a photographer longer than I've been a musician.
Wow. And some of the, being a photographer means that you have to have a good eye and a good sense of what to take, what picture to snap and what not to snap. And let's talk about that because, that's very important too, because that probably leads into your creativity.
Yeah, it's, like a French photographer, Henri Cartier-Bresson, said, that it's a decisive moment when you choose to press the trigger on a camera. And, quite frankly, I'm not interested in taking pictures of kittens with balls of wool. I'm not interested in taking pictures that match my couch. I'm only interested in real moments that happen in my life that seem to happen constantly.
What are some of the pictures that you're most proud of?
Well, it depends, photographs of my kids, but there was once CSN was rehearsing at this rehearsal studio in Hollywood, and we took a break and went to the local hamburger stand, and I see this young, maybe 3, maybe 4-year-old girl sitting on the counter next to an Uzi machine gun.
Wow.
Huh. Stuff like that.
Now, you're also involved in some other projects. I know they're involved in some political causes as well.
How can you not? Look what's going on to this country right now.
Right. I kind of stay neutral, but did you want to discuss a little bit about some of your thoughts about what's going on in the world today?
I've got a million bloody thoughts, but I'll tell you, I can simplify it for you.
Okay.
America is one of the greatest countries in the world. I've been a citizen of this country for over 30 years. We deserve better.
Okay. Do you see a bright future maybe down the road, or is it something that we just kind of have to wait and see?
Well, it's physics, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that the pendulum has swung very far to the right, but physics demand that the pendulum swings back equally, and eventually it will. How long we have to put up with this fucking madness, I don't know. I hope it ends soon. Because even though I dislike Pence immensely, I think he has at least somewhat of a heart and brain.
Right. The show Graham Nash will be at here in Cleveland will be Tuesday, September 19th at the Music Box. And I also wanted to say that I heard you, quote, say something very important. In fact, when you said it, it resonated with me very, very quickly. It says, time is to be used, not wasted.
That's right.
And I thought that very good.
Well, it doesn't matter how rich you are. You can't buy a fucking second.
That's right. Graham Nash, you're a special guest. Graham, thank you. And hopefully we'll see you on September 19th. I really appreciate your time and your insight, and the best to you.
Thank you very much, Ray. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.